Hello everybody, I'm Mark Bizzata, and today we're going to look at the progression of how students make inferences from text. When we talk about age ranges, these are generalizations, and some students may or may not fall exactly into each age range, but this should give you a general idea of how students progress on their inferring process. You could argue that we start making inferences as soon as we start recognizing facial expressions, and there are certainly some truth to that. And even before we start reading words, we draw inferences from the pictures we see in the books that we read. But in kindergarten is when we start learning how to read words, so that's when we're going to start our first phase. The first phase of inferences is the word and sentence phase. In kindergarten and first grade, they're learning the literal meaning of words or sentences, and a lot of times they struggle with more figurative inferences. One type of inference they do make is inferring how pronouns connect with their antecedents. For example, if I had the sentence, Mary ate her sandwich, in this sentence students would be able to infer that the pronoun her refers to Mary and it's her sandwich. In second and third grade, they move from the word and sentence phase to the paragraph phase. In this phase, they distinguish between literal and non-literal meanings of words. One of the reasons why kids this age love jokes that rely on word plays or puns. For example, one of my favorites is, what do you call a pig that does karate? A pork chop. Here the word chop has a double meaning, both the cut of meat as well as the action. Children in this phase can also draw direct logical inferences from a statement. For example, if you asked, are you putting a coat on? They could infer that it was cold outside. This is also the time that we start diving into fables, because fables are usually about a paragraph in length and have an obvious, sometimes explicit message. This helps students transfer into our next phase. In grades 4 through 6, students start looking at full text and can explain how words impact text as a whole. In this phase, students can identify basic figurative language like similes and metaphors, and they start connecting how word choice impacts other areas of the story, like mood. For example, Hercules was as strong as a bull is an example of a simile where we are comparing Hercules to a bull. Students should be able to recognize that the author uses the comparison to indicate how strong Hercules is, and not that he was an actual bull. Another exciting development during this phase is that students are starting to pull themes from whole texts as well. They are able to identify a theme that presents itself across the text. Again, if we use Hercules as an example, they could have read the story of the 12 labors of Hercules. They might be able to pick out that one of the themes of the story is that determination is the key to success. Students can also distinguish between the information that is explicitly stated in the text and information that's been inferred from the text. This is an important extension of being able to determine the difference between facts and opinions. In 7th through 9th grade, students start recognizing that there isn't just one right answer, and there are a lot of different ways to look at any one text. They also start questioning the authority of the author. Not surprisingly, they also start questioning the authority of their parents. Students can recognize when a text or word choice is vague and ambiguous, and they start to look for ways to clarify the meaning of words within specific context. They're also able to distinguish between the connotative and denotative meanings of words. For example, in an advertisement, they might recognize that new and improved is an ambiguous phrase and has no real meaning since it's unclear how the product is improved. Students should also be able to recognize multiple layers of meanings or themes in a text and interpret details in light of the whole or interpretations of multiple sources. For example, students could interpret this political cartoon in different ways. First, they could infer that the cartoon is representing Democrats and Republicans using standard symbols of the elephant and the donkey. Next, they can infer that one of the messages that the author is trying to make is that the two sides are not willing to work together on a law, represented in this case by the meal, only because the other side had created it. Another inference is that because the cartoon is specifically referencing the government budgets, students could infer that the author is creating a sense of irony by using a fancy table setting, including a white tablecloth and wine glasses. Students can also evaluate how strongly evidence presented supports a particular inference. This evaluation is important when students start analyzing claims, evidence, and reasoning in science and social studies. Finally, in 10th through 12th grades, students can infer based on the discourse or the context of a text. For example, creating inferences based on the text's historical period or the author's background. Students can recognize and evaluate the use of more sophisticated word choice and rhetorical devices authors use for a particular purpose. For example, students should be able to recognize that she is not a bad cook, or I will multiply them and they shall not be few, are leidetes, a form of understatement in which the negative of a contrary is used to achieve emphasis and intensity. Students in this phase can also recognize when a text draws upon a particular discourse and interpret the text in line with the conventions of that discourse. For example, students could read the Robert Frost poem Birches from multiple critical lenses. For example, they could look at the poem from a feminist, Marxist, or psychoanalytic lens. Another example would be making an inference based on how the religious debates happening in the late 1850s and early 1860s impacted how Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species was received by the scientific community. Today we explored how students start with very basic skills when inferring at that word and sentence level, and eventually move to being able to infer text at a much larger level between texts and in discourses. Thanks for joining us. If you thought the video was helpful, hit that like button, share it with a friend. Go ahead and add your comments below, or you can always join us at thelearningframework.com for more resources and videos.